Who are the authorities? A study in medical priestcraft. Most of us have attended performances given by professional stage hypnotists. We have watched the antics of people, apparently under the spell of a mastermind. Apart from thinking about the degrading spectacle of one human being surrendering his will and sanity to another, even for a temporary period, have we ever given thought to the broader implications of hypnosis? As well as individual hypnosis, there is also mass hypnosis. I once attended a performance at which the only people whom I could discern who were hypnotized were not those on the stage, but those in the stalls. This apparent anomaly should be explained. The subjects on the stage were simply actors, maybe amateur actors, but they received either a fee or free tickets to the next performance, and were simply doing what they were told. Perhaps there is some justification for their actions, but what about the audience? Are they really hypnotized? Having had some experience, and having given the matter some thought and study, I feel that I am qualified to comment on this subject. As is this is a good case of what is happening in almost every other sphere of human existence, it would be appropriate to examine it closely and, if possible, to determine just what happens. The people sitting in the stalls, the audience, had attended this performance with the expectation of seeing something. For several months, a clever publicity campaign had been carried out, with the object of convincing the public of the skill and uncanny powers possessed by the hypnotist. They were indoctrinated with the eminent respectability of hypnotism, its acceptance by high authorities, its use by dentists and doctors and others for the very high purpose of healing the sick and alleviating pain. They were led to expect a night of hilarious fun at the expense of someone else. Over a period of months, certain phrases had been repeated often enough to impress the message on the subconscious mind of sufficient people to constitute a paying audience. These people believed that hypnotism was a fact, that the hypnotist was a superman with a superior mind, that he could make other people bend to his will and do things which would make them laugh and enjoy themselves. So they paid their money and expectantly waited to have their wishes fulfilled. The key word here is expectancy. They expected to see something. They were convinced. Unless convinced, only a simpleton would waste money on something they did not expect to happen. So we see that by an adroit publicity campaign, thousands of people were mentally impressed to the extent that they really believed that what they were to see was genuine and that their wishes would be fulfilled. Anything which can do this must be a powerful influence in human affairs. This is the whole basis of hypnotism. It is the acceptance of a proposition, the desire and willingness to act upon a suggestion made. The framework of our society is based on hypnotism. People are indoctrinated by continual suggestions being made to them and their minds being conditioned. That is, the brain cells are permanently imprinted and the suggestion is regarded by the brain as a fact. Hypnotism is self-induced, although there are also outside influences, if we allow them, which will influence us. Over a period of thousands of years, man has come to rely on certain so-called truths. These are accepted without question. The majority of these so-called truths are implanted in our minds very soon after birth. The little baby is tickled on the cheeks, and the mother or father says, "Oh, you cheeky boy," or "You naughty little girl," and so on. Can you blame the child if it grows up really believing that it is naturally cheeky or naturally naughty? It has been told so many hundreds of times by two people of unimpeachable character that these things must be true. But how far from the truth these things really are? Of course, the child is not cheeky, and it is not naughty. Until the child arrives at the stage of consciousness, it is simply reacting like any other little animal should. It cries when it is uncomfortable, and coos when it is pleased. Yet, fond parents are unwittingly conditioning their children and building minds which are potentially antisocial and possibly criminal. What has all this to do with health? I have dealt with mass hypnosis and suggestion because they are so intimately related to our outlook and approach to health. Over a period of thousands of years, we have been indoctrinated with the proposition that the administration of health is the function of a certain privileged class of people. In the early days, these people were called wise men, then priests, then medicine men. They claimed to have special knowledge of those things pertaining to health, which enabled them to dispense health to their inferiors. The methods used in the past are exactly the same as used today. Whereas the medicines used have varied, the methods have not. The principle has always been that a disease is something which has to be fought. In the early days, it was believed to be a wicked spirit or devil which had to be frightened away. The methods of accomplishing this varied with the social system and the level of development of the people concerned. Early men and women looked at the stars, the sun, the moon, the wind, the ocean, rain and lightning. When the gods were displeased, they rained until there was a flood, or they withheld rain until there was a drought. All of the natural forces were believed to be for the purpose of expressing pleasure or displeasure by one or more gods. When a man became sick, he thought that his condition was caused by a god whom he had displeased. One man, a little more intelligent than his neighbours, noticed that diseases tended to run a certain course, and the patient would eventually recover. By careful observation, he could foretell how long this would take. So in the case of a cold, he prescribed a period of quarantine for 3 days, during which time the patient had to smear himself with some concoction, not to eat any food, and to recite a certain number of prayers. As would be expected, in most cases the patient recovered, and the medicine man was credited with great powers. On other occasions, the medicine man made a pointed stick or bone which had to be held near or on the diseased part. It was then buried for a certain number of days, and at the expiration of this time, the patient would be better. Later, it was believed that little people or tricky spirits caused disease. They had to be frightened away, so the witch doctor prescribed that drums had to be beaten for several days and nights in order to frighten the evil spirits causing the sickness. When someone hit on the idea of poisoning the evil spirits, a new factor was introduced. When a poisonous decoction was swallowed, the patient became violently ill, and after vomiting or an attack of diarrhea, the patient was cured. This was called purging. The evil spirits were apparently dead, or at least expelled. Then came the discovery of germs. The existence of evil spirits could not be proved, and it was difficult to convince the people that they caused the disease, especially as the patient sometimes died despite the treatment given. In the case of germs, they were found where the disease was located and could be seen under a microscope. What better proof could you have? Germs cause disease. Rich and poor, ignorant and educated, all fell for the germ theory. The only trouble was that they had their facts reversed. Instead of recognizing that germs arrive only where conditions are favourable, in filth, they believed that the germs caused the filth. We could continue through the whole sorry spectacle. Killing germs with powerful poisons, cutting out diseased parts with a knife, burning out growths with fire, radium or cobalt, injecting poisons into the bloodstream. All with the one object, to kill the invading germs. What is the difference between these practices and the practices of chanting prayers, pointing bones, or exorcising spirits by poisons? None at all in principle. Both are equally barbaric. The only difference is that one has the blessing of so-called science and is respectable as a result. So we arrive at the year 1962. What do we find? Authorities, these people who over thousands of years have held their inferiors in awe because of their magical powers, have a new title. Instead of being witch doctors or medicine men, they are now called authorities. Now, instead of quoting witch doctors, they quote authorities. The authority expects you to accept a public statement when he makes one. The authority expects you to accept his word for anything he says. When he produces a chart or a statistical analysis, it must be accepted as fact. No doubt his word is the height of rudeness, and nice people don't like to be thought rude. Some of these authorities have carried this to such extremes that they have used honorary degrees in order to reinforce their positions. I'm sorry to say that many thousands have taken the degree of doctor and appropriated it to their own use. So common has this self-awarding of degrees become that the compilers of our dictionaries have been forced to bow to common usage, and now we find when we refer to a dictionary that the original meaning in many cases is not even mentioned. The word doctor comes from the Greek word dosia, meaning to teach. A doctor was a teacher of health. The old dictionaries all had the word defined in this way. Look at your dictionary today. In the majority of cases it says doctor, a medical practitioner, or doctor, a high degree. The same applies to authorities. When a person assumes this title, one would imagine that they had done some original research work. But no, some of them blatantly admit that they got their material from a public library. Others simply accept uncritically the word of a fellow student. In some cases, of course, those who make public pronouncements are really authorities and can claim to state facts as they appear. The danger is that all so-called authorities are regarded in the same light. The public read in a newspaper that a certain miracle drug has been discovered which will wipe out a certain disease. The majority of the general public are conditioned to accept this kind of statement and are incredulous when it is suggested that this statement is quite fallacious. It never occurs to the public mind that there may be no truth in the statement at all, and the whole principle involved is a fallacy. This would be bad enough, but over the centuries there has grown up a medical priestcraft or closed union shop. Only those who practice a particular type of healing have any right to advise people or make pronouncements on health at all. This is the stage at which we find humanity today. The authority is the sacred cow. Nobody must doubt his word, ask for his credentials, or ask for proof. And yet, how often has established authority been proved wrong? Take a case at random. Jesus Christ had the temerity to suggest that the way of life being indulged in was not the correct one. He pointed out certain changes which should be made. But his ideas ran counter to the established order and authority. So his life was speedily brought to a close by the ignominy of crucifixion, a punishment usually reserved for thieves and swindlers. I had a personal experience of the same kind of thing some years ago. A friend of mine invented a system of radio transmission. University professors said it was quite impractical and would not work. Several large electrical firms confirmed the professor's opinion. Nobody would have anything to do with such a harebrained scheme. Yet today, this identical system is being used all over the world successfully. The authorities were grossly wrong, and my friend was right. Another friend of mine was dying of cancer in hospital. Her husband was told that it was simply a matter of time, a few days. Fortunately for his wife, he doubted the authorities. He had been reading Louis Kuhn's book, The New Science of Healing, and was convinced of its logic. He received permission to treat his wife by natural methods while she lay in hospital. Such a thing would never be permitted today. Need I say that the lady in question is alive today? The authorities again were wrong. In England, some years ago, there was a man named Herbert Barker. He called himself a bone setter. Today, he would be called an osteopath. He was able to help thousands of people to regain their health without drugs or medical methods. Do you think that this was appreciated by the authorities? They used every means possible to embarrass this man and to prevent him from practicing. After many years, they hit on a new plan to stop him. On the principle of, if you can't beat them, join them, they decided to offer Herbert Barker a diploma in medicine. This he refused on the grounds that he did not practice medicine, or any part of it, and therefore had no use for the diploma. The battle went on over many years until he was offered knighthood. Sir Herbert Barker. Herbert Barker said, "The medical diploma I will not accept, but this title is a recognition from my sovereign for services to humanity. I accept," and he did. Until he died, Sir Herbert Barker did not yield his principles to anyone. He died as he lived, a teacher and exponent of truth in the healing art. Again, the authorities were wrong. Is it necessary for me to bore you with a repetition of all the victories of truth over error? The pitiful part is that authority is still in control, and the battle has to be fought over and over again. A case close to home is almost parallel with that of Sir Herbert Barker. Dr. Hertz of Sydney was an orthopaedic surgeon. Because he blazed a new trail and used methods unacceptable to established authority, he was vilified and ostracized. One would think he had committed some crime. The tragedy is that the man's work was never recognized. And yet, orthopaedic surgeons are teaching and using his methods today. What was wrong yesterday is right today and has the blessing of the authorities. Again, the authorities were wrong. What is the lesson for us in all of this? The lesson we must learn is self-reliance. We must cease blindly following established authority. Truth is truth, no matter who utters it. Undue reliance on the medical profession has robbed man of his independence. For millions of years, mankind lived without the help of the medicine man, yet humanity survived. How can they explain why humanity has degenerated only since the advent of the medicine man and our perverted way of life called civilization? They don't have to explain. You must believe that diseases are caused by germs and viruses. In introducing people to the new way of life, our greatest difficulty is to overcome this mass hypnosis. Very often, people have been cured by natural means of some terrible disease, and yet years later, when the patient subsequently has some minor ailment, such as a wound or a cold, we find some of them putting ointments or drugs on wounds, or taking some medicine to cure the cold. The old medical philosophy dies hard. When people are sick, they must take something, or do something. So the battle for naturopathy all boils down to a battle for people's minds. Just as the medicine manufacturers spend millions of pounds and establish large publicity organisations in order to convince the public that their products are effective, so we must tell the public of the truth of natural living and natural healing. We must not be discouraged if our friends and acquaintances do not share our enthusiasm for the natural way of life. Most people learn by experience, and when they have exhausted all of the medical methods, they can still come to nature, if there is time. If they come too late, that is not your fault, nor the fault of natural healing. But we can all do our share by telling people, whenever the opportunity presents itself, of the benefits to be derived by returning to the natural way of life. The very best way is not by telling people alone, but by example. If you live as close to nature as you can, your improved health will be so evident that your friends and patients will ask you what you are doing to achieve such good health. This is your golden opportunity to tell them. So we can see what we have to do. First of all, we must throw off the shackles of authority and vested interests. Secondly, we must develop self-reliance so we can stand on our own feet and not only regain lost health, but maintain it. Only when mankind is free from the dictatorship of authority will the human race really enjoy health, strength, and happiness.